Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today with a Bethesda discussion video. Video Games 24/7, which is a site I frequently use for information on the channel, posted a headline that almost had me topple out of my chair in astonishment given the climate of Bethesda's fanbase where everyone's pretty pissed off and the status of Creation Club. Seeing a headline that says fan criticisms won't define what we do and fans giving heavy criticism does not seem like the best combination, so I without hesitation clicked on this article and was lured into the trap I so often try to avoid. I believe it's safe with this article to infer that they are talking about Creation Club given the fact that that's where all criticism has been directed towards, and if it was about the games itself then it would say fan criticism won't define the games we make, or fan criticisms won't define what we do with our games. Something along those lines, right? Let's get our answers. Bethesda will not let fan complaints and criticisms define what games it works on or releases. That's according to PR and marketing dude Pete Hines, who said he's well aware of a critical fan base but won't let the dissenting voices influence the publisher's plans with the likes of Skyrim, Fallout, and Doom. We're aware of it, but we're not going to let it define what we do, Hines said in an interview. Now with that quote alone, you could do a lot with it, which we're kind of seeing with this article, but yeah, if I saw this absolutely alone, that grabs my attention, saying that they're absolutely going to cut out fan feedback. I don't think any company in their right mind would want to do that. It's afterwards, when we get more information, that it fills out really what he's talking about. Ultimately, we're going to try and do things that we think are best for the games that we're making, because that's honestly all I can really control. I went to Todd a couple of E3s ago and said, everybody's going to ask us about the Elder Scrolls 6. You have to help me come out and say what the studio's path is and when the Elder Scrolls 6 is coming to try and manage expectations. And what did they do? They came out and said, we are going to make it, we're not working on it now. Fans may cry for the Elder Scrolls 6 when Bethesda announces Skyrim for the Switch or Fallout 4 VR when it announces Doom VFR, but Hines made it clear that his development teams aren't just a vending machine where you press for the soda and they just go back and forth. They want to be able to stretch their legs creatively or try a new idea or do something different and just not fall into the same pattern. Now I understand that. I respect that, but you just released Skyrim Monopoly, which is like the 40th rendition of Skyrim. Let's be honest, we're pushing the vending machine on Skyrim at least. There is a Skyrim vending machine in existence that you are pressing at the very minimum. I mean, I found a Fallout operation board in GameStop, so I mean, you might be pressing the Fallout vending machine just a little bit, but not too bad right now. Jokes aside though, he pointed to an example of another development team's success this year, praising Guerrilla Games for stepping away from Killzone to create Horizon Zero Dawn. It might be my favorite game this year, he said. I think you see a lot of developers do that, and quite honestly, if we didn't have folks break from it, then you don't get Horizon Zero Dawn. Like, how unbelievable is that game? And if Guerrilla just stayed on the path that they were known for, you'd never get that game. That's what Pete Hines is getting at with fan criticism not defining what they do. A lot of people saw this headline and got really upset, and I understand with what's going on with Creation Club. If we saw this, I'd get really mad with it too. I really like his example of Guerrilla Games and Horizon Zero Dawn personally, just because I relate to it so much. I said for many podcasts, for those who listen weekly, you'll know that Horizon Zero Dawn was going to be a flop in my book. There's no way that the creators of Killzone, which is, in my opinion, a pretty average shooter, that they could make an open world epic. But it turns out that was one of the better post-apocalyptic universes in modern gaming, on top of a really interesting story, intriguing characters, fun arrow-based gameplay. They really knocked it out of the park, and if they listened to fan criticism, where most people might have been saying, hey, let's just stick with what works, right, and they didn't experiment, we wouldn't have gotten that game. I personally believe developers shouldn't be restricted. I think it's very clear that after Fallout 4, Bethesda Game Studios needs to try a new IP because their ideas do not fit the Fallout franchise at the moment. And for those who aren't too convinced that Bethesda isn't listening to fan criticism, they did knock the Creation Club price for survival mode back down to 500 credits after a lot of us freaked out about the fact that it moved up to 800 outside of that minimum price range. Now that's very important to note because that shows that at least Bethesda is A, listening, but B, that our criticism is being directed in the right area. I talked about this a little bit in my video discussing Doom and Wolfenstein 2 being on the Switch. Some people were upset because Pete Hines mentioned new game, but it ended up being a port, which depending on your interpretation of new game, it could be a new game or it might not be a new game, so people were upset. When talking to sources working at multiple companies, one thing I've learned is that when you have a fan base that freaks out over literally everything that happens in a more negative fashion, the company starts to kind of close the blinds and shut out the fan criticism and feedback and do their own thing because they feel like no matter what they do, they're getting yelled at, so they go, let's just do our own thing until something works and people stop yelling at us. I'm not saying it's logical, I'm not saying it's smart, but that's why you gotta pick your freakouts, really. So that's why with the community really focusing their freakouts on the Creation Club, it's excellent because we see that type of feedback where, yeah, I think survival mode should be free, but at least we knocked it down out of that really high price range. So Bethesda is listening to fan feedback to some extent, but they're not letting it define what IPs they're going to experiment and stuff along those lines, and we should encourage that type of experimentation in the games industry in general, or else we're not going to get those excellent new IPs, like, for example, Horizon Zero Dawn. It's interesting what a headline can do, right? The second I saw this, I thought to myself, no way, they're really going to dig themselves into a deeper hole after this, but when you look at it, it does make sense to me, at least personally. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on this in the comments down below. Fire away, folks. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon. Do consider supporting that as it fuels all the content we create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.